Hi, this is Rick from For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. The very first time I was asked to sing publicly, like as in doing a solo, I was in elementary school, maybe in grade 3. Nothing like X Factor, nothing like American Idol, nothing like that. It was during this little conference that an elementary school would put on, so the parents could come and just clap and say, "Yay! Look at them, they're so adorable." It was that kind of thing. I totally froze. I remember standing at the back of the gym, like this is traumatic for me. It has stayed in my memory, and I can still recall some of the images and some of the sounds and the teacher interacting with me. I was at the back of the gym. I was looking at the stage, and I was just standing still. I couldn't walk any further forward. And my teacher saw me, and my teacher came back to the back of the gym to get me, to help me to the front and onto the stage so I could sing, and I just couldn't move. My brain was frozen. I couldn't remember the words. I couldn't remember how to sing. I couldn't remember how to walk. The moment has stayed in my brain. I even remember my teacher bending down so that she could talk to me and try to encourage me. And remember, the only word that I knew how to say, the only part of the English language that would come to my brain was the word no. And that was it. That's all I could get out. No. And I had been practicing for weeks. And I also remember seeing the teacher go up and asking one of the older guys to step forward. A minute later, the song had started, and another older guy did my 2 lines of a solo, and I was standing in the back shaking my head, asking myself, what just happened to me? What about you? Have you ever been in a situation where you're doing some kind of public speaking, public singing, and you just shut down? You forget the words to everything. You lose the ability to function. I'm talking about stage fright. The struggle is real. If you've got a good story about getting some kind of stage fright, pause the video, share that stage fright story with whoever it is you're watching with. This video is based on Psalm 31, verses 1 through 5. It has absolutely nothing to do with stage fright. However, it does have to do with fear. Sometimes we're called upon to pray, and sometimes what we're praying about is actually pretty scary. What we're praying about is so scary that we can't find the right words. We kind of get something similar to stage fright, except in the form of praying. This psalm has something to say to us about how to pray when what we're praying about is overwhelming. It's a really big deal, and we're just at a loss for what to say. Psalm 31, verses 1 through 5. O Lord, I have come to you for protection. Don't let me be disgraced. Save me, for you do what is right. Turn your ear to listen to me. Rescue me quickly. Be my rock of protection, a fortress where I will be safe. You are my rock and my fortress. For the honor of your name, lead me out of this danger. Pull me from the trap my enemies set for me, for I find protection in you alone. I entrust my spirit into your hand. Rescue me, Lord, for you are a faithful God.
Hey kids, don't forget to look in the background for all of the cool characters.
And remember to watch this week's episode of Connect HQ. Bye!
Here's what I want to share with you in this video around my understanding of Psalm 31. How to pray and stay calm when it's a big deal. As if wrapping up with COVID isn't dramatic enough, now we're seeing a war in Ukraine. And I think it's a pretty good time to pray. I think praying really works because God is capable. But I wonder, how do we pray for this? What are some good words? What words would be good enough to use so that I don't make a mistake and mess up about praying and mess up about being effective for something this serious? Praying about big things like this, like, oh man, like I've had my share of not really knowing what to pray throughout COVID, because it's a big deal. And now we're back to another moment that can be another, and it is another big deal. I'm like, God, do I even have good words here? How do I pray about this? I remember the first time I was called on to pray publicly. I froze. I had no words. It lasted about 20 seconds, and 18 of those seconds was me in silence, not knowing what to say. When we pray about really big things, sometimes we struggle. When the fear center of our brain is activated, sometimes the words really struggle to come, and we feel like we have some kind of stage fright, and God hasn't heard us, and we're not good at praying, and we have no words, and we just sit silently, or we don't even try. Praying for what's happening in Ukraine is a really big deal right now. So we're going to look at these first 5 verses of Psalm 31. And what I have for you is 2 tips. 2 tips. So you can pray for things that are a really big deal without getting messed up. Here's the first tip. Let empathy be your guide. The text uses these phrases. Turn your ear to listen to me. Rescue me quickly. Be my rock of protection. Pull me from the trap my enemy set for me. I entrust my spirit into your hand. Rescue me, Lord. Let's look at what David is doing here as he's praying for himself. David identifies his need of protection and his need of being heard. David is saying that he needs a rock. The changes he's experiencing are horrible, and he wants his life to have stability again. Ultimately, David's need for attachment with God is really clear here. There's a deep surrender as David reaches out and asks for God's care for his spirit. It acknowledges by faith that God is all good and all powerful. Regardless of the result, all creation belongs to God, and David is God's servant. So he's reaching out and saying, God, I'm at the end of me. Just catch me in your hands, because it's all I got left, but just to fall into your hands. I personally haven't been part of anything like that, like we're seeing in the psalm, like we're seeing in Ukraine this week. But I have had moments when I felt things like David mentions in this psalm. Not similar things, but certainly I can identify with some of the emotions here. The weeks leading up to me discovering that I had high blood pressure made me scared. I was blacking out while I was singing. The room wouldn't stop spinning. I constantly felt my heartbeat. I was leading a lot of kids and youth programs at the time, and I discovered that I couldn't do my job anymore without blacking out. Ultimately, it was only a short moment of my life. Lasted maybe a couple of months. Nothing like what we're seeing today. But it does help me to remember how it feels like to hate the changes that were happening to me and wanting God to be my rock. I think that by reflecting on my own experiences that this psalm leads me to, it's going to create empathy in me. And that empathy is going to help me effectively pray for Ukraine. Because the more I can put myself in the shoes of the people experiencing the pain, the better I'll know what words to use when I pray. I can let empathy be my guide. I know what it's like to be alone. I know what it's like to have to go through changes that are thrust upon me that I don't want to make. So I can pray intelligently if I use empathy to be my guide and guide the words that I should share with God around the suffering that's happening in Ukraine right now. The second tip that I have is ground on God. We see phrases like, you are my rock and my fortress. You are faithful God. I've been trying to figure out what happened to me that one day way back in, I think it was grade 3, as a little guy, unable to walk up to the stage in the gym. I think I know what the problem may have been. I think I was catastrophizing. I was only thinking about my feelings of fear. I was exclusively focusing on how scary things were and how much worse they were about to get. So my response was pretty normal. When we only focus on our fear and we ruminate and we catastrophize, we defeat ourselves. Our amygdala, the fear center of our brain, takes over, and it's run away or freeze or lash out. And this can happen while we're praying too. Just because we're praying doesn't mean we can't access the fear center of our brain. And sometimes we do. So here's how not to. In the second prayer tip, I'm really drawing from this psalm the idea of grounding on God. Focusing on the problems and allowing ourselves to get overwhelmed, even while we're praying, is totally not helpful. We're not going to pray effectively if our praying is triggering our brain to get scared. I mean, pray as you need to pray. There's no judgment here. There's just me and my opinion on the video right now. In my opinion, only focusing on the problem while we're praying is a great way to trigger that fear center of our brain and get us ruminating and get us catastrophizing. We're not really doing us any good, and we're making for ourselves a harder time to find the words to pray. Let's not use our prayers to paint the worst case scenario and exaggerate beyond what things are like. When we pray about our problems and only focus on our problems, I think we can work ourselves up and take away the sense of calm that we really need. Ground on God. Let your empathy guide you as you pray, but also bring your thoughts back to God and remind yourself who you're praying to and what He's capable of. God is capable. You have His attention. Pray about the need, and while you're praying, draw your attention back onto God's capability. The second focus of these verses is all around God's capabilities. David shares that God is capable of saving him, capable of keeping him from disgrace, capable of rescuing him quickly, capable of being a rock and protection and a fortress, capable of leading David out of danger. As he rehearses some of the things that God has done, it helps him to hold on to hope, and it helps him to know what he can request of God. Because God is capable of rescue, he prays for rescue. Because God is capable of protection, he prays for protection. Throughout this psalm, David goes back and forth between what he's feeling and what he knows about God. Like verse 22 is an awesome example. In panic, I cried out, I am cut off from the Lord. But you heard my cry for mercy and answered my call for help. He shares his true emotions and perspective, and then he grounds himself back onto God with a singular focus because it's all he has, and God is enough. Here's a summary. I am totally not the best person to teach about praying. There are some people that gather in For Community that pray in a way that make me feel like I'm still in junior kindergarten. So if you think you could have done a better job, you are probably right. And I'd love to hear what you have to say this Sunday. Here's what I'm seeing in the psalm to help you pray for what's happening in Ukraine right now. Let empathy guide the content of your prayer, and ground on God to remind yourself of His capability. That's it from me to you for now. Would you please like? Would you please share? Would you please subscribe? Would you please ask for the link? We're gathering this Sunday, 10:30 a.m. and 6 o'clock p.m. And if you would like to support For Community, you can find the link to support us down in the show notes. For Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. Please pray for what's happening in Ukraine, and see you next time.